provide you with the lowest per GB rates, night or day. SLT 4G, driving you ever forward.
It starts at the top. The President calls on parliamentarians to set an example in efficiency. The Prime Minister, meanwhile, laments lack of policy evaluation in public spending.
But at the end of the day, policies are not for politicians. Policies are for people.
Bettering its own low, the rupee plunges further to a new depth against the US dollar.
This is not the policy that should be adopted in a monetary policy approach of the central bank.
But one way which we can offset this is if our trade balance was at a stronger position.
The assassination plot. The police assures a comprehensive investigation into the alleged assassination conspiracy involving the head of state and the former Secretary of Defense. Shedding war mentality. The Jathika Helurume calls on the government to grant amnesty for security forces as well as terrorists. Sri Lanka currently locking horns with Afghanistan in a do-or-die Asia Cup match. Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammika Kanayaka. Let's start you off with the local stories. President Maithripala Sirisena is of the view that the Parliament requires a change in culture if it is to be efficient. Addressing an event in Colombo today, the head of state said that by inculcating efficiency in Parliament, the public sector mechanism can be transformed into an efficiently functioning entity. Meanwhile, speaking at the same event, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe touched on the topic of public spending. The Premier lamented the lack of policy evaluation, which he says is one of the main causes of increasing debt in the country.
Eval Colombo 2018, which saw the participation of parliamentarians from over 70 countries, development partners and stakeholders, was held in Colombo today under the theme Responsible Parliaments, Embracing Evaluation for Agenda 2030. The inauguration ceremony was held under the auspices of President Maithripala Sirisena. The main aim of the forum is to promote dialogue among policymakers, to encourage evaluations for decision-making and reaffirm the importance of using evidence as part of good governance.
It is the responsibility of Parliament to strengthen democracy and ensure human rights of each citizen. It is important to first evaluate our own Parliament. I believe women can play an important role in improving efficiency of Parliament and in moving towards development goals. Our government sector has 1.5 million employees, but, according to reports, public sector efficiency is only 30 to 35%. Therefore, we must improve efficiency of our parliamentarians in order to improve the capacity in the state sector.
We would not have had this high level of debt if there was policy evaluation. We have built cricket fields next to wildlife reserves. We built an harbour which had one ship a month coming in, an airport which had one plane a month coming in. If we look at our total debt, much of the borrowings could have been avoided or put into more useful sectors if we had done the evaluation. For instance, most of our spending has gone into non-tradable goods without any return. So here is a classic example of policy without evaluation, putting a burden on the people, and at the same time, there is no return in investment. So we have to restart our whole economic policy of investing in tradable goods. But at the end of the day, policies are not for politicians. Policies are for people. People should benefit.
On the sidelines of the forum, parliamentarians representing from various countries and stakeholders expressed views on challenges faced in ensuring transparency in public spending.
One of the reasons and the main manifestos of our new government is to ensure that public accountability is always supreme. It is always country-specific how evaluations should take place. The government of Prime Minister Imran Khan is committed to bringing change, but change is always painful. And change is never welcome. So the idea is for us to make sure that we don't hit the most vulnerable segments of the population, and that the change should start at the top. Because if I want people to follow me, there is no way they're going to follow me if I'm having a good standard of life, which the SDGs are trying to implement, and not give it to anybody else.
I think one of the biggest problems across the world when it comes to public spending is that a lot of politicians will make investment decisions based on the preferred outcomes of the next election, whereby politicians will make decisions on investment, populist decisions, to make sure that they are re-elected to office.
Our government spends a lot of money in development projects, but without good governance we cannot attain good goals and the real objectives. Corruption, maybe like a problem of governance, maybe in some countries there would be a problem of will to promote and to make evaluation systems.
Parliamentarians, by their very function, are entrusted to make sure that the policies are fit for the people, that the well-being spreads all across the different strata of society. Well, the last time I was in Sri Lanka was in 2006, and I'm flabbergasted by the developments that have occurred since. Obviously, this not come from a parachute, but is due to like a deliberate policy, and this is triggered by public spending. So public spending, evaluating public spending, making sure that public spending reaches its intended goals, but also a key principle in the sustainable goals, leaving no one behind.
Moving on to other local stories, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa charges that the government's implementation of the law is partial. Addressing a function in Rajangani in Anuradhapura yesterday, the former president went on to say that law and order in the northern province has fallen to ruins and that the police has failed to enforce the law as required.
The law is not implemented in the north today. The army is just confined to their camps. High-ranking officials in the police and their subordinates are there only to crack jokes. How can we run a country in this state? We have the required legal system, but the government hasn't done anything for the people in the past 3 years other than burdening them. They have established an unlawful institution called the FCID and also the so-called special high courts. They take up cases targeting Gotabaya Rajapaksa and my chief of staff. The government is attacking my family and those who are close to me. I must tell the government that this is enough and it is time they go home.
The director of the Terrorism Investigation Division, DIG Nalaka De Silva, has been transferred to the police IT division pending the conclusion of ongoing investigations against him. Police media spokesperson SP Ruwan Gunasekara said the transfer was instructed by Inspector General of Police Pujit Jayasundara. The police assured a comprehensive investigation into the alleged assassination conspiracy involving the head of state and the former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
The organisation Anti-Corruption Force recently revealed an alleged conspiracy to assassinate President Maithripala Sirisena and former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa with the involvement of the head of the Terrorism Investigation Department, DIG Nalaka De Silva. The Anti-Corruption Force accordingly lodged a complaint with the National Police Commission and also lodged a complaint with the Victims of Crime and Witnesses Assistance and Protection Division of the police. The Inspector General of Police thereby ordered investigations into the alleged plot to assassinate the President be carried out under the Criminal Investigations Department. The Operations Director of the Anti-Corruption Force, Namal Kumar, told Derana that a group of officers from the CID recorded a statement from him around midnight on Friday, which lasted for more than 6 hours. Namal Kumar was also summoned today to the CID to record a statement.
The Criminal Investigations Department consists of highly skilled and competent officials specializing in such investigations. They are currently conducting inquiries in this regard. We ensure a comprehensive probe.
The CID today informed the Fort Magistrates Court that investigations into the allegations have begun. Fort Magistrate Lanka Jayaratna meanwhile ordered 4 electronic media institutions to produce unedited footage of the statement made by Namal Kumar of the Anti-Corruption Force at a media briefing recently. Meanwhile, Director of the Terrorist Investigations Division, DIG Nalaka De Silva, was temporarily transferred to the Police IT Division. According to the police media spokesperson SP Ruwan Gunasekara, the transfer was made upon instructions of the Inspector General of Police.
Chairman of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Professor G.L. Pieris, urges the government to take necessary measures to withdraw the two United Nations Human Rights Council resolutions Sri Lanka co-sponsored with the United States in 2015 and in 2017. Professor G.L. Pieris made the plea in reference to the recent statement by President Maithripala Sirisena that he would announce a set of new proposals at the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. President Sirisena said that new proposals are aimed at facilitating harmonious solutions to allegations of war crimes. The 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly will open tomorrow at the United Nations headquarters in New York.
We now have a statement by His Excellency President Maithripala Sirisena that when he addresses the United Nations General Assembly in New York on the 25th of September, he is going to put forward a new set of proposals with regard to the way forward regarding all these contentious issues. Now, I think there is a clear duty on the part of the relevant officials of the government to brief President Sirisena about the true position in this regard. It is simply not possible for a head of state to address a General Assembly in New York and to change in any way, to rescind, to modify any resolution that has been passed by the Human Rights Council. It was a unanimous resolution, which the Sri Lanka government actively and vigorously supported, that silenced all the other countries that stood by us through thick and thin during the Mahinda Rajapaksa period. If President Sirisena wants to recommence this process, he must start in Geneva. New York cannot help with regard to this matter at all. So the officials need to explain to him that what he is proposing to do cannot be done. And therefore, he needs to be briefed about the structure of the United Nations system, the essential functions and responsibilities of the different organs that constitute the United Nations. Then he has to start the process again in Geneva. The United States has dropped out, but the United Kingdom and Germany have taken over a leadership role, and they are insisting that the government of Sri Lanka should implement its own promises, nobody else's promises. So this is a situation, it is teeming with contradictions, and that is why the foreign policy of Sri Lanka is in this intractable mess.
The Jathika Helaurumiya calls on the government to grant a mass amnesty to both military personnel as well as members of the terror group the LTTE, considering their conflict engagement in order to free the nation from war mentality. General Secretary of the party, Minister Partli Champika Ranawaka, made this remark speaking at a media briefing today.
Some Tamil politicians want to punish army personnel but not LTTE cadres. There are others who are of the view that the army should not be punished even for a crime they committed. The LTTE was not the only uprising within the country. The JVP riots too can be categorized as an act of terrorism, but they are living today safely. We request the crimes of these people be categorized. If the army or the LTTE cadres had committed anything to achieve military objectives, then they should be granted a mass amnesty. If they have murdered, kidnapped or raped women, then cases should be filed immediately against them.
The Supreme Court today announced that it will inform Speaker Karu Jayasuriya of its determination on the draft of the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. Earlier this month, the JVP tabled the draft of the 20th Amendment in Parliament, after which a special determination petition challenging the bill was filed before the Supreme Court by parliamentarian Uday Gammampila. Several motions challenging the 20th Amendment to the Constitution were taken up for hearing today before a three-member bench comprising of Justices Sisira Diabru, Prasanna Jayawardena and Muduru Fernando. Submitting a motion for intervention on behalf of the JVP, parliamentarian Vijitha Herat stated that the 20th Amendment presented by his party does not violate the Constitution by any means. MP Vijitha Herat sought the issuance of an order stating that a referendum is not required to pass the bill. Appearing on behalf of the Attorney General, Additional Solicitor General informed court that a two-thirds majority of Parliament as well as a referendum will be required to pass the bill. The Supreme Court, concluding its three-day hearings, announced that it will be informing the Speaker of the decision taken on the motions challenging the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. Now, to read more on this story, log on to our website www.otherderana.lk. Now, we're going to move in for a short break. There's going to be more news on the other side, so stay tuned.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Welcome back. Now let's take a look at the rupee. The Sri Lankan rupee plunged to a fresh low against the US dollar today. The selling rate fell to 165 rupees and 14 cents against the dollar. Now speaking to First at 9, former Minister of Finance Ravi Karunanayake said that the central bank's lackadaisical approach to intervene has led to the further fall of the rupee.
The central bank website showed that the Sri Lankan rupee further weakened against the US dollar today as selling prices reached 165.14 rupees. According to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan rupee has depreciated by 5% against the US dollar during the year up to the 27th of August 2017. Furthermore, reflecting cross-currency movements, the Sri Lankan rupee depreciated against the euro, the pound sterling, the Japanese yen and the Canadian dollar, with appreciating against the Australian dollar and the Indian rupee during this period. Reuters, however, noted that in the month of September, the rupee depreciated by 1.5% and 6.8% so far this year. Sri Lanka is not the only country that is hit by the rising US dollar. The Indian rupee has been sliding against the US dollar in recent days as emerging markets come under pressure. That has made the currency one of Asia's worst performers, losing 12% this year. According to analysts, US President Donald Trump's decision to impose sanctions on Iran and trade tariffs on imports from China and other countries has put a spotlight on currencies globally. In currency markets, the dollar succumbed to some selling pressure, with the greenback index down 0.2% at 94.778, having bounced from low of 94.359 at the end of last week as treasury yields rose. Emerging market currencies were mostly weaker after a strong run last week following the Turkish central bank's decision to sharply raise interest rates to show up confidence in the era.
This particular moment, the cost impact on the cost of living as well as the cost to the budget is something which is insurmountable. On that particular basis, there has to be a equilibrium between two ends. One is the allowing to depreciate as well as defending the rupee so to ensure that there is no burden that it brought on the people. At this particular moment, I could see that it is a lackadaisical approach utilized by the central bank in ensuring let things happen type of approach. So on this basis, you don't need anything at all. If a free float takes place, that is all what is expected. This is what the IMF has also been saying. But it is inimical to the Sri Lankan economy because people are living on imports, so that gets pushed out. And resultant factor is that just because the depreciation, our exports are inelastic. So on that basis, there is no huge surge of exports that will take place owing to the devaluation.
We have also seen that the trade balance widening, and since 2007, the trade balance has doubled. And we feel that if a government has carried out proper policies and adhered to proper economic fundamentals, so this situation would not arise. We need to have policies which are consistent for at least 4 or 5 year period. But however, what we feel is with the Yahapalana government, they are incapable of doing this with the infighting which is going on.
Now, issuing a communique today, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka says Nomura Holdings, in an email to media, noted that it has corrected their Damocles report to fix Sri Lanka's short-term debt figure to be $7.5 billion. However, decided to keep Damocles' score for Sri Lanka unchanged. Earlier this month, Nomura Holdings stated that Sri Lanka is at risk of an exchange rate crisis and was given a score of 175 among 30 emerging markets.
On the 10th of this month, a Japanese financial holding company, Nomura Holdings, published a new analysis on 7 emerging economies at risk of an exchange rate crisis, among which was Sri Lanka, accompanied by South Africa, Argentina, Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey and Ukraine. Nomura's findings are based on an early warning model called Damocles, set up to identify exchange rate crises for 30 emerging economies. The article went on to say that Nomura's report, Sri Lanka charted the highest Damocles score of 175 among 30 emerging markets, and added that countries' refinancing needs are large, owing to reserves of less than 5 months of import cover and high short-term external of $160 billion. However, following the article, CBSL refuted the figures highlighted in the report, saying that Nomura's analysis had made a serious computational error with regard to Sri Lanka's vulnerability and highlighted that Sri Lanka's short-term external debt is nowhere near $160 billion. Issuing another communique today, CBSL announced that Bloomberg, in an email to media, said that Nomura has corrected their Damocles report to fix Sri Lanka's short-term debt figure to be US $7.5 billion, however decided to keep Damocles score for Sri Lanka unchanged. Furthermore, the communique noted that any methodology that yields outcomes whereby Sri Lanka's score is substantially worse than countries like Argentina, Turkey and South Africa does not appear to be sufficiently nuanced to capture market realities and dynamics. The CBSL also noted that a closer look at Nomura's Damocles score for Sri Lanka shows that it has remained above 100 continuously since 2012, except for a few months in 2013 and 2014. Therefore, it is evident that in the case of Sri Lanka, this rudimentary index cannot be considered an indicator of crisis.
Now, to give you a market update, Sri Lankan shares fell slightly to a near 3-week closing low today as investors sold manufacturing and banking stocks in dull trade and the rupee hit a fresh low in its record-setting spree. The all-share price index ended 0.05% weaker at 6,028.49, its lowest close since the 28th of August. It lost 1.4% last week, its first weekly drop in 4. We have Dimantha Matthew from First Capital Holdings with more details.
The bourse closed in the red for the second consecutive session, dragged down by distilleries and Lion Brewery. The index had a volatile movement throughout the day, reaching an intraday low of 6,022, prior to closing at 6,028, losing just 3 points. Both the turnover and volume had dipped compared to last Friday, while a net foreign inflow was witnessed, reversing the continuous net negative trend witnessed over the last 3 consecutive trading sessions.
Now let's take a look at the day's currency rates. It's time to take a look at what's happening around the world. Prime Minister Theresa May cautions rebels in her party that unless they support her potential Brexit deal, the EU, or they more like, will face a potentially disorderly no-deal exit. The IMF said it would make the United Kingdom significantly poorer.
The United Kingdom is due to leave the EU on March 29, and yet little is clear. There is so far no full exit agreement, and some rebels in Theresa May's Conservative Party have threatened to vote down a deal if she clinches one. May told BBC TV, "I think that the alternative to that will be having no deal." The fate of May's government and her Brexit plan is in doubt because it is unclear whether she could command the 320 votes she needs in the House of Commons, the lower house of the British Parliament, to approve a deal. The International Monetary Fund meanwhile warned that a no-deal Brexit on World Trade Organization terms would entail substantial costs for the UK economy. The IMF said that all likely Brexit scenarios would entail costs, but a disorderly departure could lead to a significantly worse outcome. The IMF expects Britain's economy to grow by 1.5% in both 2018 and 2019 if a broad Brexit agreement is struck. Speaking at a news conference at the Treasury in London, Christine Lagarde, the IMF's managing director, added that those projections assume a timely deal with the EU on a broad free trade agreement and a relatively orderly Brexit process after that. The IMF said a no-deal outcome would affect other EU economies to a lesser extent.
A powerful storm which killed dozens of people in the Philippines is now making its way across southern China. Typhoon MANGKHUT is one of the most powerful storms to hit the region in decades.
Tropical storm MANGKHUT continued on its destructive path as it hit the southern coast of China, killing 2 after leaving at least 64 dead in the Philippines amid landslides and flooding. According to Chinese state media, more than 2.5 million people have been evacuated in Guangdong and on Hainan Island. The typhoon is now moving inland and is expected to hit the Chinese regions of Guizhou, Chongqing and Yunnan. In the Philippines, 33 miners have been confirmed dead and at least 29 are missing after a landslide hit a mining site in Itogon in Benguet province. Search and rescue missions are continuing and there are fears the death toll could rise above 100. Videos on social media showed apartments in Hong Kong swaying in the wind, scaffolding crashing to the ground and commercial buildings with windows shattered. Transport services have also been suspended, with flights cancelled, trains stopped and major roads closed. MANGKHUT is expected to gradually weaken into a tropical depression by tomorrow as it continues to move inland.
In the meantime, the deadly storm Florence drenched North Carolina with more downpours cutting off the coastal city of Wilmington, damaging tens of thousands of homes and threatening worse flooding as rivers filled to the bursting point. The death toll rose to at least 17. The National Weather Service said Florence dumped up to 100 centimeters of rain on parts of North Carolina since Thursday and continued to produce widespread heavy rain over much of North Carolina and eastern Southern Carolina. More than 900 people were rescued from rising floodwaters and 15,000 remained in shelters in the state. We're moving for a short break. Up next is sports. Stay tuned.
You are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana 24/7.
Now moving on to your weather forecast for tomorrow. Temperatures are to vary between 20 to 36 degrees Celsius with a high of 36 expected in Batticaloa. A low pressure zone will develop in the western province and is expected to gradually disappear. Now moving on to your rain forecast for tomorrow. Most parts of the upper region of the island will experience sunny weather except for Putlam and Vaunia. In the lower half of the island, many parts including Kandy, Colombo, Gool and Matra as well as Hambantota will experience showers. Let's take a look at your city-by-city forecast. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. And before we go, we'd like to take you to a village in Sri Lanka named after the river Nanuoya. It is located in the Nuwara district, which is famous for tea plantations. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bringing you the news and information 24 hours a day. This is Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana 24/7.